And you're recording. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the City of Richmond Reimagining Public Safety Community Task Force meeting. Today is Wednesday, February 10th, and I would like to welcome everyone this evening. And first, we will be taking a roll call. Eddie Chacon.
Here.
Police are investigating a crash that
Luis Chacon.
Present.
John Gosney.
Here.
Dewana Joseph. Randy Joseph.
I'm here.
Hey, okay, Randy, I thought I saw you. Kristen Killian Lobos.
I'm here.
James Lee.
I'm here.
Armand Lee. Shirley Leslie. Laura Mangles. Marcus Injisang.
Hey, here.
Tanya Pulido.
Present.
Joey Schlemmer. Deborah Small.
Present.
Andres Soto.
Presente.
Good evening. Nakari Sion. Ben Terrio.
Here.
Okay, it's 2.
David Tucker. Tamisha Walker. Linda Whitmore.
Present.
And BK Williams. Okay. So I'll just go over briefly the meeting procedures and some general information about access to the meeting. We will be allowing for public comment in a section of the agenda, as well as following the presentations. And in order for the public to do so, you will need to, if you are signing in via your computer, tablet, or mobile device, and if you are on as a video conference, you can follow the link and raise your hand using the raise your hand button at the bottom of the screen. Or if you are doing by telephone, you can press *9 to raise your hand. And at the beginning of public comment and following each presentation, we will be allotting 2 minutes for the public to raise their hand. And after that 2-minute period, we will not be allowing any other speakers. Each speaker will be called upon in the order that they raise their hand, and we will allow 1 minute per speaker. If you have any questions, let me know. And with that, I would like to add that tonight we will be, this is our first attempt at doing a polling feature, which is technically Zoom has set this up because we are on a webinar. They've set that up for attendees. However, we ask the attendees to please refrain from answering the poll. And we ask the panelists to be the only persons who respond. So I appreciate that in advance. With that, we will be going into the public comment section of the meeting. And I will let Stephanie start the 2-minute time period, or Lupe, I can't remember. If you guys can.
You're at minutes.
It looks like we have 1 minute left for the public to allot time for raising your hand. Luca, can you announce when it's over, please?
And we have 3, 2, 1. All right. That was the 2 minutes.
So it looks like we did not have any public speakers for this evening. So we will go on to the staff report section of our agenda. And first, I would like to ask if anyone from our interdepartmental team would like to speak or make a report briefly on anything that they feel the task force needs to know at this time. Okay, it looks like we don't have any speakers for that. So I have a couple of housekeeping items that I would like to go over in addition to a few other updates for all of you. And first, I would like to give you all a status on, we have been asking for a city council liaison, and it looks like the item is on the city council agenda. However, it is being pushed back to a different meeting. So we still do not have a city council liaison. In the meantime, our finance person is no longer with the city. So we're just assigned a new one this week. And I let him know that we would be contacting him to get further information for our budget sub-working group, as well as coming to present to the entire group. I've contacted the police chief today and asked her to get us in contact with the finance person that's dedicated to the RPD. I was under the impression that that person went through the finance department, but I was wrong about that. So we should be having that person's information soon. Let's see. The other thing is that as I've been coordinating and contacting various agencies and groups and individuals about coming to give informational presentations to this group based on the topics that you all chose and requested, and looking at our schedule of presentations up through the end of this term, some of the groups, and we may have to lump some presentations together and kind of rearrange a couple of the dates. So I just wanted to let you guys know that, and that I will be, of course, letting you know, because we also may be having an additional group come. And then I know originally the RPOA wasn't on the original schedule, but they were requested to come. So we're finding a date and time for them as well. Then I just want to talk a little bit about the subgroups. I know that some of the groups have been meeting, and I've let it be known that I'm more than welcome to, or more than happy if I'm welcome to come to the meetings and help answer questions and be there as kind of an informational guide. And so please, I know that a couple groups have sent me their meeting schedule, and I'll be happy to make as many of those meetings as I can. And like I said, just help answer as many questions or provide guidance. And again, I sent out an email with the link to the Google Drive where you should be putting in your notes and reports. And also, if you have specific questions that you want to ask staff or requests of staff, that if you could put those in a separate document so that we can transfer that into what we're calling like a tracking document. That document has all the questions from all the groups and also from the public combined into one document so that it can be like a rolling answers, and anyone should be able to access that and get answers to any questions. And then that way you can see if your question may have already been answered or asked by another group. That will also, we've also created that as a running document from the community roundtable sessions, where we've collated all of the comments, all of the questions, any concerns, and we have published that on our website. And that document will be ongoing, and it will be prepared for all 4 of the sessions together. And we really encourage you, each of you individually and as a group, to really take time to look through the website and dig through there and look around. There's lots of information. There's also a question that you may have, you'll find it there on the website. In the meantime, I would encourage you all to start doing outreach if you haven't already. I know some of you have, to invite members of the public to our next, or organizations or resident experts or whomever you want to invite to our next community roundtable session, which is on Thursday, February 18th. We had a really great turnout last time, and it would be great if we had that same amount of people, if not more, at the next roundtable. And so in addition, the subgroup should be already working on formulating not only an informational report, but crafting a few recommendations that they want to bring back to the full group. And in the folders, I've put a copy of like a template staff report that we send to council. And it's just to kind of give you some framework around how some of these recommendations should be crafted, what the wording sounds like, and that sort of thing. It's not meant to tell you like exactly what to say. It's just basically a grammatical template. So please, if you have any questions about that, if your group has any questions, like I said, I'll be happy to come to your meeting, or you can connect with me on email. But we do need to really start thinking about sending recommendations to council as quickly as possible if those recommendations are going to have any sort of budgetary consequences, because the budget season is now and some of the budget is already being formulated, and we don't have much time to make recommendations in order to get those in that will affect the next fiscal season. It may be something that would go into the following fiscal year, but we are running out of time on that. I also want to let you all know that there was some question about having the working group or the subgroup meetings be public. And I just want to remind you all that if you are trying to do that, you will be restrained by the Brown Act. You'll have to post your agenda and you won't be able to deviate from that. And then I also want to let you all know that like the working groups is really where the agency of this group or this task force is. And those groups are really important, and that's where a lot of the work is going to get done. These meetings, even though the next meeting will be a working meeting and it will be where each group gets a section, I'm thinking probably 15 minutes for each group, where you'll present as much of your information and findings that you've come up with so far. You can make a recommendation. It should be fairly concise to the entire group. And then the entire group can vote on whether or not that's something that you all as a group want to endorse going to city council. So much of the work and the thoughts and the deliverables of this group will be done in those working subgroups. And with that, that brings me to the conversation around, there's been a few people that have requested on several occasions to nominate co-chairs. And I know that at the last meeting, I did say that I would be sending out a poll regarding that. However, after like reviewing everything and looking at our timeline and looking at our structure and in compliance with my original directives, I'm letting you all know that staff, meaning me, I will take full accountability for this, that I will not be facilitating any co-chair nominations or voting for co-chairs or facilitating that. And I just, mostly because I feel like we don't have a lot of time, and that's really taking energy and effort away from what the big picture is and what we're really dealing with. And I just would hate for us to get mired in the small details of an administrative hiccup. And so if there's anyone who has an issue or a problem with that, I just suggest, and please feel free to go, to the city manager's office and make a complaint and let them know that what your concerns are about that. So I also wanted to let you know, you may notice that Mr. Jim Nantel is visiting with us this evening, and that is because he is our new interim Community Services Director. So I would like to introduce him to all of you. And I see that there are 2 hands raised. So before I let him speak, give us about 30 seconds, Jim, and I'll call on you, Don, and then Tanya.
Thank you very much. You spoke at length about the working groups, the subcommittees.
Mhm.
It sounds like they've been meeting. I haven't seen anything on the website about any schedule or announcements about these meetings. I thought these were supposed to be public, and how can they be public if the public doesn't know that they're meeting? I mean, how do we publicize these?
They're not public meetings, they're ad hoc committee meetings. And I sent out an email I'm not sure how long ago now, requesting everyone to put themselves on a different group. And so every member committed to being a part of one of 4 different groups. And so, I mean, I invite you to select a group to be a part of, or you can be a part of all of them if you'd like, but they're not public meetings, they're ad hoc committee meetings.
So if they're not public meetings, they're secret meetings. I'm hearing that we've got secret.
That's how you want to put it, but we need to go ahead. And do you have another question about something else that I talked about?
No, I get the point here.
Okay, thank you, Don. Okay, Tanya.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about because I agree with you, Joanne, we don't have like a lot of time to make recommendations. And so I think having some deadlines or a timeline of like by when should we have these recommendations like drafted and stuff, just like very clear dates on like when these things need to happen would, I think, help all of us in like, creating that urgency around drafting these recommendations.
Thank you, Tanya, for bringing that up. The issue is that each group, the dates vary, and it also depends on us getting a city council liaison. And then it also depends on what types of recommendations you all are making. So it's very distinct between the groups, which is why I would love to come and speak to all the subgroups specifically and directly.
Yeah.
Then I can answer that more specifically.
I think in my regards, at least, it was like in the budget, like the financial budget recommendations.
Okay, well, I can bring that to your group if you'd like. Okay.
That sounds helpful.
Okay, thank you. Andres, and then we need to go ahead and let Jim introduce himself, so then we can introduce our guests for this evening, and I'm sure that they're going to be bringing us lots of great information.
Yeah, following up on Tanya's point, because I'm in the same committee is heard. Is, you know, we've made a number of informational requests of staff, and it'd be helpful to know when we can get that information, because that would that will be key for us making recommendations. And I want to follow up on Don's point. I have trouble understanding why the subcommittees are not also subject to Brown Act, and would like to see a city attorney's opinion detailing how and why these committees would not be subject to Brown Act. And if they were, if they are Brown Act, or if we choose to make them Brown Act committees, which I think they should be, then we would need to get assistance from city staff in posting the agendas in a timely fashion, and also making the links to these meetings easier. I looked on the agenda and I tried to click on where it said Zoom link, and nothing happened. So I had to go in through Zoom and just put in the numbers, you know, the meeting number and the passcode to get into the meeting. So
let me make sure, okay, I'm sorry, Andres, to cut you off, but let me make sure that I'm making sure to answer all of your questions. First, as far as the deadlines and the timelines, I will be happy to come to your meeting and give some of that. And then I've also, we've expressed that, and there was an email sent that there is a tracking document, and many of those questions that you all posted are answered in there, and we will also be addressing them to your group, and we also will be addressing them at the next meeting. Some of them are to other departments, and we can't, I mean, we have to wait for them to respond to us, but we are looking at most of your questions, I believe, were answered in there, and there's some of them that we will be answering specifically. As far as these groups being public, there's been much discussion and deliberation about these are, for lack of a better term, ad hoc groups, and ad hoc groups are not subject to the Brown Act because they have less than a quorum of the members. And so that they're more of, as we've been calling them, a working group. And you're more than welcome to invite the public to your specific meeting. And if you want to do that and manage that way your group, then please let us know. We will, of course, be helping you put your agendas on the website and that sort of thing. And that's, you know, that's not a problem. If your group decides to do it that way, then that's fine. But other than that, I don't know if I will, if it's feasible, if all of the groups don't want to do that, for us to go and get a legal opinion on why this, I mean, they don't have a quorum. And I've never known any committee to have to agendize meetings that have less than a quorum. And did I get all of your points? Because I really need to move on.
Well, you touched on them, and we had some new questions. I have seen the tracking document, and I appreciate it, even though some of the answers are rather brief. And regarding the Brown Act, I guess that's something I would need to take up then independently with the city attorney's office. If
That's fine. And if you'd like, I can come to your meeting and talk more about this, because I think that
I'd rather hear from the city attorney, frankly.
okay, gotcha. Okay, it doesn't look like, I think Randy had his hand raised, but it's lowered now. So I'm gonna go ahead and let Jim introduce himself briefly, and then we will go into our presentations.
Okay, thank you, Joanne, and delighted to join you all tonight. My name is Jim Nantel, and I am a retired city manager who's been working in the public sector for the last 46 years. 23 of those years, I worked in parks and recreation, libraries, and golf courses. Were responsible for those kinds of activities. And the other 23 years of my work, I was working as a deputy or a city manager, retired as a city manager from the city of Burlingame. And certainly have had a chance to review all of your videos from all of your previous meetings. So I appreciate the work that you're all doing and the enormous energy you're putting into it, and commitment you're making is extremely important set of criteria that directive that you're trying to respond to. So I'm impressed by the work that you're taking on, and I know you know how important that it really is. And just in response, I would be happy to solicit a public opinion from, a legal opinion from the attorney relative to the fact that the subcommittees have been left to their own to decide whether or not they want to make their meetings public or not. My impression after all the years I've been working with the Brown Act is that Joanne's response again is if it's more than a majority, half plus one of the task force is meeting, then it must be a public meeting, as you have indicated. But I will look into that. And again, I think as I've understood what Joanne said and what I've seen in the notes, she has kind of left that up to the committee. So I have been able to attend one of the meetings because they made their one of the subcommittee meetings to listen in because they made the information public. So, but anyway, if that would work for you, Member Soto, I'd be happy to try to look into that for you and get a response back to you. I know that right now the city attorney has 3 or 4 vacancies out of her staff, and so they're giving us legal opinions rather slowly. But I would hope before you meet again that I can get that clarified for you.
And just to be clear, that information wasn't made public. It was sent to Jim and I so that we.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. I apologize. I misunderstood that.
Thank you. Okay, so I want to thank you, Jim. Nice to meet you. So we will go ahead and everyone, please help me welcome our guest this evening. Jamie Jeanette, she is from Contra Costa County Health. Her and her team, I'm gonna go ahead and let her introduce her team. Let's see, where are you? Oh, there you are. They are from the, I believe it's called H3. That's the acronym or the name of their group. So I'm gonna go ahead and let her start speaking. And we have also Daniel Barth here, and he is from SOS Richmond. He'll be going after Jamie Jeanette and her folks. And then Michelle will presenting a few more items that we haven't heard from her yet. So Jamie, welcome again. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thanks for having us. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. I'm going to share a quick PowerPoint slide because we have so much information that sometimes it's easier to have some visuals to go with it. So I'm Jamie Jeanette. I'm with Health, Housing, and Homeless Services, and that's the county health department's homeless program. So I'm going to talk today. My role is community engagement specialist. So I'm sort of the interface between our system of care and the outside world. And then I have a couple colleagues here that are part of one piece of our service system. So they're going to talk a little bit in a minute. But I'm going to give you guys sort of big picture. So every year, for the most part, we do an annual, what's called a point in time count, where it's actually a requirement from the federal government that we do basically a snapshot in time of one night at the end of January to identify everyone we can find that is experiencing homelessness on that one night. So what I'll say about this particular data source is that it does not capture the full picture, but because every community around the country does this, it allows HUD, the federal government that's the primary funder, to kind of compare apples to apples. So last year when we did this, last January, we identified about almost 2,300 people that were experiencing homelessness in our county on that one night. And about 700 of those were in shelter. About another 1,500 were unsheltered. So those are folks living in encampments, in their cars, in abandoned buildings, in parks. And about 5% of those households were families with children. And there's a full report that you can go and see if you're interested in being a nerd with all the data like I like to do. So what we can see, and again, this does not tell you every single person, it's who we found on that night. So we saw in 2020 in January, Richmond, we identified about 280 people that were unsheltered. So this does not count folks that are staying at the GRIP shelter and Bay Area Rescue Mission and Brookside Shelter and Cali House. These are folks that are unsheltered. And you can see that Antioch and Richmond had the largest unsheltered populations in the county. followed by comfort. So one of the big questions that we get is like, okay, so somebody's homeless, like, what do you do? How do people connect in with services? So there's really 3 access points at this point. Folks can call 211, and that is how you start to connect people in. Sorry, my cat is on my desk. So with 211, people will start to, they'll basically do a triage, ask some questions. They're available 24 hours a day, so that's one of the benefits of 211. They won't necessarily be able to solve their problem, but what they can do is kind of sort out what the real issues are and what resources might be appropriate. 211 is also a connection point to CORE, which I'll talk about in a minute. So care centers are brick and mortar sites where people can walk in and access services. So things like laundry and showers and food and case management. So GRIP is one of the care centers in our community. So right now, GRIP and Trinity Center in Walnut Creek are the 2 care centers. And then CORE, which you're going to hear a little bit about in a minute, they are the mobile outreach teams. And so we'll talk more about that in a minute, but they're really vital because they're reaching out to all the folks that are unsheltered, that maybe don't have a way to get into a care center, or for various reasons are not interested in sort of connecting in with service sites, but still may need services, may need to get connected to mental health, behavioral health. CORE teams can help connect people in with drug and alcohol services. So CORE is really vital, and we're going to talk about that more in a minute. So once you connect with those 3 access points, like then what? What do you connect to? So there's different kind of buckets of service in our community. So prevention is really designed to, say for example, I lost my job and I knew I was getting a new job in 3 months, but I couldn't pay rent for those 3 months. And if I didn't pay rent, I was going to get evicted. But it's a sort of concrete, time limited, there's, financial resource would actually solve my problem. Prevention is a good resource for people that are at risk of losing their housing. Rapid resolution is more, maybe I became homeless, I'm newly homeless, and maybe I could live with a relative, but they couldn't maybe afford to house me and feed me. But if I could come up with a little extra money for food, maybe I would be allowed to stay with them. Or a lot of times what happens around here is folks are from somewhere else and they get kind of stranded here. And maybe they have a stable place to land, but it's in Ohio. So rapid resolution will do some problem solving conversations to see if there's a safe place for somebody to go that's not our shelter system, because it's totally impacted and there's very few beds. And rapid resolution is not going to work for everyone, but it's a way of trying to sort of filter people out so that the people that end up in our shelter system and using those services really kind of don't have other options. Street outreach is CORE. Emergency and interim housing. So COVID, as you might imagine, has made things real interesting. But this covers our big congregate shelters, as well as right now we have a hotel program because of COVID. And so I'm happy to talk more about that later, but that's basically, this encompasses shelter. And I'll say that for single adults in our county, we have about 28% of the shelter that we need for single adults. So if you had 100 single adults without kids that were homeless, we only have beds for 28 of them. And the rest of those folks are going to be living in encampments. That's who you're seeing on the street. Or you're not seeing them and they're living other places, but they're not in habitable shelter. Housing navigation services are designed to help people connect in with housing. So we have folks in our community that have maybe never been housed, maybe they're not literate, so they can't fill out a housing application. Maybe they just need some support looking for housing, getting to a landlord appointment. Housing navigation services can also help pay for some last month's rent or credit checks or rental applications, which can add up if you don't have a lot of income. And then permanent supportive housing is another resource we have in our system. That's really for the most vulnerable people in our community. So these are people that have been experiencing homelessness and are disabled, and they will need permanent, basically, rental support as well as support services. And the other thing I'll say is that our housing navigation services and all these places are connecting people with all kinds of housing. So not just permanent supportive housing, but that's a piece that we offer in our system. And the arrows actually point to every resource that Richmond actually has physically in its geography, which is a big deal because most communities don't have all of these things. So Richmond is pretty well resourced, and it's still not enough. So I just wanted to flag, we have, I actually have, this is in English and Spanish. So this is, if you have somebody that's experiencing homelessness, this is our flyer, and you can pull down a PDF of this from the link on the bottom. So I'll make sure that, that you guys have a copy of these slides, but just wanted you to see. So it tells you the location, what kind of services, and the hours, which may look a little different right now because of the pandemic. So now I want to turn it over to my colleague Hillary to talk about CORE. And Hillary, I'm just going to take your cues about when to move to the next slide.
Okay, can everyone hear me? Okay, hi, my name is Hillary. I'm an outreach coordinator with CORE. And CORE stands for Coordinated Outreach, Referral, and Engagement. So we're that helps to stabilize people that are unhoused, living outside through outreach. We help to deliver basic needs, build relationships, and also to help people secure permanent housing. We have quite a few teams. We have over 30 staff right now. We have a program manager, 3 coordinators, and then these are all the teams that you see here. And I'll just quickly describe a little bit about each team, but I won't take too long. Team A and Team B are all county teams. Those teams can go to any part of Contra Costa County. Team A is typically in the unincorporated areas of West County, and Team B is typically in East County, but they can travel. Also, Team C is our afternoon and evening team, and they are an all-county team as well, and they can travel as well. We have our youth team that works with 18 to 24. We have our youth and families team that works with families. And we have our BART team, which works currently, the hours are a little different because of the shelter in place. They work at the BART stations to support people that are staying there and riding the trains. We also have our Pleasant Hill Martinez team. We have our Concord Walnut Creek team. We have the Public Works team that can work in the creeks. They also help with providing trash bags and things to people that live in encampments. We also have our HDAP team, which is Housing Disability Advocacy Program. That's a program that we work with the GA with to make sure, so it's for people that are on GA and they're pending Social Security. They can get subsidy for housing for that. And then we have a Richmond Sam Tablet team. So one of the biggest things that we do at CORE is to build relationships. A lot of what we're doing when we're going out in the field, initially, people are scared, they're living in encampments. Sometimes they don't trust people. They think that they don't understand that we're there to help and offer services. So a lot of what we're doing initially is just building that relationship. So some of the ways that we do that are helping provide food and water. We also can provide basic needs. So we help work with different agencies that offer shower, laundry, clothing. We can connect to healthcare. So we work with the Healthcare for Homeless vans to make sure that people are, they do harm reduction, they do health services, exams, they can do needle exchange. We also provide mental health and substance abuse treatment, so we can link people to those services. Mainstream benefits, Social Security, GA, we help people with housing documents. A lot of people lose things, birth certificates, driver's licenses. We can help get those replaced for free. We help with reentry services, so people that are coming out of jail can call 211 and we can help link them to services. Then we also can work with adult protective services, domestic violence, human trafficking, and more. And as Jamie talked a little bit about, a lot of what we have had to do this year has been different because COVID-19 has changed everything for everyone. And so In addition to the services that we already offer, we've been providing additional food support and distribution. So we do provide some more meals. Our afternoon team has been able to work with agencies and the hotels to provide food. We provide health and sanitation, masks, hand sanitizers, safety survival supplies. We've given people, we have some programs. We help people get the different phones so they can have a cell phone to use and chargers. We provide training, education on COVID. We provide masks. And then we also provide support when people are displaced in an encampment. We provide linkage to the hotels. So we're currently in priority 1, which is people that are 70 or over or have at least 2 chronic health conditions. Even with that, though, the hotels are typically full. So right now, it's been challenging. We also do testing in connection to health and behavioral health services, and we do education on fire. We work with the fire department to educate encampments on safety with fires.
Sorry, trying to unmute myself. So I wanted to highlight, thank you so much, Hillary. So I wanted to highlight some of the partnerships and funding that the city of Richmond has with the county. So we are active on the Richmond Homeless Task Force. So I see Michelle, hello. So we have core team members that attend that meeting, as well as me and sometimes our Brookside shelter staff. So pretty involved in that. So there is, as you saw, there is a core outreach team that is split between the cities of San Pablo and Richmond. And so Richmond and San Pablo both have decided to put funding towards a team that is just in your jurisdiction as a way to ensure that that the folks in your community are getting core resource. And then I wanted to highlight, there's a ton of state money and federal money right now that's kind of flying around. But one thing I wanted to highlight was the Homeless Emergency Aid Program, so HEAP funding. There was a decision made to give a pretty big chunk of that to Richmond, and so you can see almost $60,000 is going to SOS Richmond, another $260,000 to the City of Richmond Safe Park Program, which I know you guys are working hard to get off the ground, and then another $180,000 to support the Richmond San Pablo Core Outreach Team. And I just wanted to close by saying, if you are interested in getting updates about homelessness, we have a bunch of different kinds of mailing lists, so you don't have to get all the information about all the things. But you can go on our website and sign up to be on the mailing list and select the kind of information that you want. Or you can always just email me directly and I will connect you with what you need to be connected to. And that is our presentation. So I'm happy to take any questions. And Michael Callahan, who's our core manager, and Hillary are here to help answer questions you might have about what's happening on the ground.
Marcus, you have a question?
I do. Thank you for the presentation. Very informative. I'm just curious, what kind of subsidies do you guys work with as far as housing?
Great question. So there are a bunch of different kinds of funding for housing. Right. So, and it took me a while working in this field to kind of understand. So there, basically the homeless system of care basically only works with people that are homeless. So our housing funding really is specifically for people that are homeless. So that doesn't include Section 8 or housing choice vouchers. But we do get funding for things that are like, I described the permanent supportive housing, which is for people that are pretty high need. Yeah. There's also funding for what's called rapid rehousing. So that's like, if I just needed some time limited support and both financially and with case management, but then could eventually fly on my own, that's rapid rehousing. What we don't have very much of anymore is what's called transitional housing. So mostly that's now just for special populations like maybe veterans, young adults, people working with drug and alcohol addiction, because the solution to homelessness is permanent housing. So the idea is like, you don't want to make people have to like have transition after transition for if they could actually just move right into permanent housing with the appropriate supports. So we on our website have some information about the kind of funding that's going for housing in the community, and I can drop that link in the chat. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I'm a housing case manager for the city.
Oh, okay, awesome.
So I was just wondering if you guys use similar funding, similar voucher programs and things like that.
Yeah, what program are you with?
I'm with the city of Berkeley,
Okay, got it,
social services. Yeah.
got it, got it.
Thank you.
Totally.
Are there any other questions for Jamie and Hillary? Oh, okay, let's see, who got their, Andres.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. One of the things, maybe I missed it, but I didn't see any indication about capacity for serving non-English speaking populations, particularly Spanish speaking, as well as some of the key Asian languages. I'm thinking Chinese and Punjabi, particularly around here. So where are you guys at with that, and how many staff do you have that are fully bilingual?
That's a great question. That's a really good question. So one thing I didn't really frame very well in the beginning is the county is one of a bunch of players. So we have some of our own programs with shelters and outreach and housing, but there's actually probably 10 other agencies that are providing all these different kinds of services. So the language capacity may differ from agency to agency. Mike, I don't know if you want to talk at all in terms of core, what your capacity is around other languages. I will say 211, for example, they have access to a whole bunch of languages through a language resource line if somebody calls in. Care Center, I don't know for the 2 care centers if they, for example, have bilingual Spanish speakers. Everybody has access to the sort of language translation line, but that I know can be super awkward and not very useful. But Mike and Hillary, I don't know if you have anything that you want to add around core.
Yes. So for the core teams, we have 2 Hispanic speaking people. That one of them is on the all county team and is focused in the West County, and they do work with a lot of the people. And as one of our teams, if they come across somebody that doesn't speak Spanish or an area of people that don't speak Spanish or don't speak English, they will make sure that she gets over there, because a lot of them they don't understand, they don't know who we are, so they'll go over and talk to them, fill them in on who we are, look for our uniforms, look at what we wear, and know that we're there to help them, and kind of that helps us break the ice for the beginning. But she works with them, and I actually just sent Michelle Milan one of the success stories they worked. It took a year, but it was a very successful story with one of our Spanish speaking people that worked all the way through their problems and got back on their feet. And then we have Ruben that also works on our Public Works Unincorporated Creeks team. But when the same thing, if we have somebody that we need him to talk to, we bring him over, or we can switch out pieces of the team, put one person, and bring him out to that area so he can speak with them. So.
Thanks, Mike. The other thing I wanted to add is that we don't ever ask about immigration status. We will serve everybody, including folks that aren't documented. The one exception is sometimes federal funded housing will have requirements around specific kinds of documentation. But for all of the sort of crisis services and many of the housing programs, there's no restrictions around immigration status.
And we do have translations lines also.
Yes, I was just gonna.
But what about languages other than English? I mean, other than Spanish, and those translation lines. That's kind of weird.
Yeah, translations are not the easiest thing, but that is kind of what we have for that right now. Other than Spanish, so we have Spanish speakers, and it's pretty much we have to use the language lines other than that. So.
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think you're highlighting one of the gaps that we have in our system.
Thank you.
I think Ms. Dandy's next.
Good evening, everyone. I just want to tell you guys about a few things. I'm actually in 2 meetings again. I'm listening to one, and I'm going to speak here really quick. I'm now with
Miss Dandy, though, do you have a question specific to Jamie and her team?
Yes, I'm going to say something to them.
Okay, because we
Okay,
do
so
have
working
other
with
presenters.
CORE, I know that they do have a lot of things that can help with the housing and working with the families and working with the people that are out there. And they do have a lot of lines that you can call 211. My main question will be, and always has been, and I talked to Jamie about this, and I just want to put everyone on alert and ask a question about this, is now since we're having an influx of the youth homelessness that are in between the ages of 16 and 19, where there's no housing for them, especially if my youth have children and they have babies, 16 with a child, and that is homeless. Where are we going to be able to place them? Where are they going to go? Jamie, I know you spoke about services, West County having services, but I'm always going to say, no, we don't, because we don't have enough.
We don't have enough.
We don't have enough. Most of the times, the calls that I've made over the weekend, which did help out, were in East County, but I don't have them in West County. And we're having an influx of teen pregnancies, especially because of COVID. So what are we going to do about that, being that they're not old enough? They can't get their own welfare. They have to be emancipated. Courts are closed right now. We can't get them in a timely basis. I've been going to wherever they are and doing their food stamps and everything. But even though they're still getting denied because they're too young and they're on their parents, or they can't get it at all. So
yeah, I think
you're
again, you're highlighting where there is a need for more resource in our system. Definitely. And I didn't go into detail about sort of the youth piece of our system, and I don't think we necessarily have time for that, but I'm happy to get more information to this group if you have questions too. Just we'll say that we do have a youth continuum of services. Right now, that's really for 18 to 24-year-olds. And so what Ms. Dandy is saying is like there is this gap for unaccompanied minors and unaccompanied minors that are parenting. And usually what happens is that we will refer them into Oakland where they have more resources. We don't have a huge number, but there are definitely, and I think, as you said, like there's a growing number. So I think this is again an area where our system could use more support and funding and capacity.
My last statement to go with that is, and we talked about this before, so I want to put this in people's ears too. Yes, we do have agencies that are in Alameda County, but most of my kids that I work with do not want to go over there, which leaves me in a space of not being able to get them connected, because most of the things that they know and they live by are here in Contra Costa. And when they go to use their Medi-Cal in Alameda, they send them back to Contra Costa. So then there becomes a transportation issue for my youth. So that's a hard one to work with, but that's what I have.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Dandy. Deborah, you're next.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. Thank you for the presentation. My first question has to do with the information that you started out with. I know that it's the normal federal practice to do the snapshot of homelessness in January. And in a normal year, that would be okay, all things being equal. But last year was not a normal year in any sense of the word. So I'm curious about whether or not the department did any additional surveys around homelessness to ascertain the level of homelessness in the county after that January date.
You're asking a great question. So one thing I'll say is that we, like pretty much every other Bay Area county, decided to not do a point in time count this January because of safety concerns around COVID. What I will say is this point in time count is one data source, but what we actually have in our whole system is basically all the homeless service providers, as they're working with people, including CORE, they are entering information into a database with these people's permission. So we have an annual report that's coming out soon, hopefully, so that we can actually look in much more detail at what's happening with the people experiencing homelessness in our community. So point in time count is one quick snapshot. I can drop in the link in the chat for you if you want. We have an annual report from 2018. But as you said, like what I've been hearing from sort of experts is we probably won't see the impact of COVID on homelessness and housing for probably another year. Probably will take that long to really see the full impact of people becoming homeless, you know, and eventually getting evicted. But we are capturing data all the time about what's happening in our system. What the point in time count captures that we don't necessarily capture in that data is people that aren't accessing services. So, and there is, you know, there are a chunk of people that don't connect with our service at all, any of our services in the community. But I would say that's the minority. Does that help answer your question?
Thank you. And I just had one other question, which is that I know that we've had a moratorium on evictions in effect from the spring, but I've also heard that there are many landlords who are bad actors who have been working to get around that moratorium, and that many of the most vulnerable renters are not aware of either the moratorium or the various ways that it protects them. So I'm just wondering, in addition to sort of educating people in the community, is there any aspect of your office that actually tries to track down some of these bad actor landlords and bring sanctions against them for not honoring the moratorium?
Right. That's definitely not within our scope, but I will say Bay Area Legal Aid is very active on this issue, and they are the resource that we generally refer people to. And they, I know, are sort of tracking this moratorium issue closely, and they have a whole segment of their work that's around housing and supporting renters. So they actually are probably tracking that fairly closely. What I don't know is sort of what's the stick for landlords. It's a good question. I don't know. It's definitely not something that our department takes on, as we're mostly providing homeless services. But it's a good question. It's something I'll have to sort of think about, like, where would that even fall? Oh, and
thank you.
Michelle had something.
And my final question has to do with sanitary services, access to sanitary services. I know that your work is making sure that people have shelter, but we all know that there are lots of unsheltered people in the community. And one of the consequences of COVID is that most of the public bathrooms have been closed. And libraries and other places that provided, you know, that option for people are closed. So what additional efforts has the city and county made to make sure that people have access to basic sanitary services, particularly for those people who are unsheltered and living in encampments?
Great question. So when COVID first hit, one of the things that, so there's a whole like layer of activation that happens at the health department when an emergency happens like COVID. So there are actually porta potties and hand washing stations that have been placed in various cities, sort of in a partnership with the city and the county. And so I know Richmond has a couple. The challenge has really been around showers. And I know there's been a few mobile shower programs around the county, but in terms of toilets and hand washing stations, that's something where there's a few that have been placed around Richmond. But it's, again, like, that's been a huge blow to people that they can't go into Starbucks, they can't go into the libraries, can't go into the gyms to do their showers. So yeah.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the information.
Thank you,
Absolutely.
Deborah.
That's what I'm here for.
Thanks, Deborah. And I also want to remind the attendees that there will be space at the end of the full presentation and after the full discussion from the panelists with the presenters. There will be a chance for the attendees to speak at that time. So Tim and then Randy, and then after that, I would like to make sure that we're offering Daniel Barth and Michelle Milam an opportunity to present. Go ahead, Tim.
Okay. Well, hey, listen, thank you for that presentation. I'm a captain with the police department. Jamie, I was going to ask you, can you take just a quick moment to share what your partnership with the police department looks like and how do you utilize RPD in conjunction with your services? Sometimes there's an assumption that officers are occupying homeless encampments kind of indiscriminately, when actually what we really do is we work in cooperation with CORE when you guys need us and on a call for service basis. Can you just share a little bit about how you guys partner with the police department and what that partnership actually looks like? Thank you.
Sure. I'm going to punt to
Jamie, you
Hillary
want
and
me to take
Mike
that one?
because this is your wheelhouse.
Okay, so this is one of our good things that we've learned out there is we have a really good relationship with almost every police department in the county. We are basically the bumper between the homeless and the police department. We've basically both become partners because they don't want to arrest anybody arrest anybody. It's a waste of their money to take them to jail, and they'll just get out in a few hours anyway. What they do is now they meet with them, they find out what their needs are, they refer to us, they have direct contact with our team. They would call our team, and then we can try to bring services to them. Sometimes they'll just say they say, hey, I want services. They don't want to get in trouble, and they come to us. Sometimes they'll say they want services. They come to us, and we're able to get them help. So we have really good relationships with the police. Pretty much, we're in contact with them every day. I speak with Michelle Milan pretty much 2-3 times a week, if not every day. We share success stories just to kind of build each other up. So we gives you that motivation to keep going. The relationship with the police are very, very, very important.
One thing I wanted to add, thank you, Mike. So in terms of one of the things that is usually kind of high profile and we get a lot of questions around is what's called abatements of encampment. So basically when an encampment is going to get cleared out. And there's actually a whole protocol that's been developed to be used throughout the county so that when a city decides that they need to clear an area for various reasons, so there can be real health and safety issues in an encampment that require it to be cleared. There's a notice that gets posted and then CORE gets called and they go out in advance of the clearing and with the idea that they're going to be like notifying people, but also really trying to connect them with services and usually in normal times, in the before times, would hold a couple shelter beds. So there's, we're really trying to, in this community, have all the resources made available before an encampment gets abated. And sometimes folks, either there's not resource available or people don't want it, but CORE has a big role in that process of going in before anything happens.
Okay, and Randy?
I'm going to put my hand down because Captain Simmons asked the question that I had, and Deborah asked the question before, so I have no questions.
Got you. Okay, I'm going to lower your hand then. Oh, you did it. Thank you. I appreciate you, Jamie and Michael and Hillary, for coming this evening, and I invite you to please stay so that you can continue to inform the conversation, but I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Daniel Barth and from SOS Richmond.
Hi there. I'm Daniel. Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good, because I'm using my old computer here. That's what volunteers have to do. I get a little bit of money because we're doing this tiny little project called SOS Richmond Safe Organized Spaces. Maybe we can put up the PowerPoint and walk through. One question is how much time, how are we doing on time?
Well, it looks like it's 6:30. Our meeting adjourns at 7:30, so we have some time.
All right, sounds good. So SOS Richmond stands for Safe Organized Spaces. If you ask people who are unsheltered, what do you need? Well, you need safe. Folks need safety, and I think when people recognize how unstable life is, how precarious and predatory life is on the streets, and how those evictions, that no matter how much you talk to people about this is a stable situation right now during COVID, they won't believe that because we're used to, and if you're chronically homeless and living on the freeways, on the creeks, on the train tracks, on the streets, in our parks, well, you've been going from all of them. It's not like you're staying in one spot. Most folks have to push to another location because there is so little resource available for them. And we know, as Jamie said, this is going to get much worse. And so here we are trying to create a place of more stability, and that requires organization, of course. And so organizing is what we need to do. And who does the organizing? Really, it's the folks themselves. And so if we're creating safety, trying to or improve safety and improve organization, we need space for that, and folks need a place to be. And so if we at SOS Richmond are doing anything well, and we've only been around for, providing services for a little more than a year, and I know most of you, so it's like we're beginning to make this little tiny organizations making an impact, very much in part because there's so little actually happening to improve the conditions in the encampments. I mean, I see CORE every time out there, and CORE, you're immense, you're amazing. And what we need to additionally do is, you see those guys on the left, they're all unsheltered, right? They need a stakehold in the work that we do to improve conditions. There you have conditions on the right there. That big old pile of trash is because that pile, before it was removed from the UP tracks, don't tell people that we took trash from quote unquote private property. It's in our full view, and people are living there. So really, we need to treat it like a public space because people are living there. And unfortunately, maybe fortunately from a quality of life standpoint in our neighborhoods, but that area which we had cleaned then has just been swept by Union Pacific, and all the people that were there are no longer there. So where are they? They are spread, and there's not a COVID practice to be spread from your place. So that's where one of the largest disconnects happen, is that the county, city could be working together, doing the best it can to keep people in place, but there's these other actors that are less accountable to our local neighborhoods. So who's going to be available to try to advocate for the for folks who are on a property where, on Caltrans, for example, the state isn't going to come talk to us? Well, we're going to talk to them. So how do we do that? Is we start to make a statement. What is that statement? And in short, what is it that we can do? Why don't we go to the second slide? What is it that we can do to change the conditions? If you can flip it to the second slide, that'd be great. Sorry, I'm not controlling my scene here. What can we do? Well, you're seeing it right in front of us. It's right in front of us every single day. We have trash that people are living in. That's Peter right there on the ramp in Point Richmond. And the place is an absolute mess. We can talk about, well, what did you do, Peter? But really, that's been there for a long period of time. So we need to clean that stuff. Who is we? Well, let's hire our own folks to be out there doing that. We call that our streets team. So can we employ unsheltered individuals to utilize what they know, right? They know each other. Folks know each other. They have relationships, bad, good, ugly. We can actually try to turn it into more positive relationships. And what do folks have that I don't have? I don't have knowledge of their neighborhood. They have knowledge of their neighborhood, right? If I want to go to Parkchester, like we're going to do, I'm going to be talking to Parkchester homeless, unsheltered folks to gain the knowledge, to work with them with their knowledge. So next slide, please. I'm going to try and keep it quick so that we can have question and answer. And how are we going to solve this problem? It's not a turf issue at all. And who is the we? The we is all of us. And that's why Safe Organized Spaces is a community organizing network. You and I and everyone in that picture, and everyone who we encounter who tries to work in our encampments to improve the conditions, we're the community organizing network. It takes all of us working together, housed and unhoused, working in partnership, one neighborhood at a time, trying to address the existing conditions so ultimately we can address homelessness in general. So, and we have a strategy, and it's right in front of our eyes what needs to happen. So next slide, please. So if we're going to do something, just like Deborah said, we need to provide those basics, those basic amenities. We can call it WASH, water, sanitation, hygiene. Sanitation's human waste. It's also the waste that we're seeing, the debris everywhere. Water is a big issue for folks. And as Jamie said, we don't have showers, not a single public shower. I think GRIP finally started to open its back up again, one at a time to get in. But for folks to be able to get showers, they now have a program because our little community organizing network got the resources, and now we're trying to raise the money in order to provide that basic resource called shower power. And so we're going to try to address safety, not just in those encampments, but also it's about our neighborhood safety. How can we improve order in our neighborhood? But that means building a trusting relationship between those who are on the streets and those who are in their housing, where they have such fears for our unsheltered community. And very important, it's important for folks to have a sense of purpose. So when we hire folks, what are we tapping into? We're tapping into their desire to have that meaning, to have that direction, to have that ability to get up early enough to do the work, because now they have a schedule to maintain. Can we provide those opportunities? Absolutely. $15.50 an hour is actually pretty good. And now we have our person who is a Project Room Key. Jamie didn't really talk too much about Project Room Key. It's a shining star of what's happening, because you take someone out of a creek, and then now there's a hotel room, and our person who was highlighted in East Bay Times last week, Randy, he's a living example. So now he's our field organizer. He's the one who's now doing the supervision of our safety guardians and is making sure that our streets team is out there doing good work. So we're creating indigenous leadership, and we're engaging across the sectors, right? We got businesses talking to us. We're negotiating to help take care of their neighborhoods. We're trying to build that relationship with the railroad. Well, we don't have Union Pacific yet, but we have, and the city has been trying to create a relationship with Richmond. I'm not tooting my horn, but I kind of am, is that we were able to get Richmond Pacific Railroad to the table to do something. And now it's the city's turn to respond, to bring dumpsters so we can do something collectively with the homeless, with the unsheltered folks under Richmond Parkway taking the lead. So that's about building a real us together response. Next slide, please. Ultimately, what we want to do is build acceptance so that we can have the solutions like this transitional village that we need to have, that we're having, this RV village that we can talk about. That's an intervention that has been waiting to happen for so long, and it's entered our lexicon and our minds that we can actually have transitional villages in our community, in our minds. But in our neighborhoods, we need to get it into everyone's minds for folks to understand that if we have a stable, secure, and organized and well-managed location where folks are living, then it's going to be a safer neighborhood, period, full stop. They need to understand that. We need to help them to see that by taking what you see, that trash right there, and turning it into what you're seeing below. Is right there on the lower side there, we're clearing out public land that has been the dumping ground in North Richmond, right at Vernon and Castro. And we can clean it all out with our hands, right? Mounds and mounds and big old tons, to the point where the city is now complaining that that we're removing too much trash, right? That's this neighborhood's trash. So we have to get to the systemic issues, but it starts by modeling this change process. And that's what the streets team does. It models first for the encampment folks, so that we give folks bags, and then the bags that you see on the right, that's the team and the unsheltered residents working together. And now I have bags all over town waiting to be picked up because folks are bagging their stuff. You look under I-80 and Central Avenue, you used to see a big old mess, but now you see a bunch of bags sitting there waiting to be picked up. That's progress. We have modeled positive change. Next, and that's public space stewardship. Next slide, please. So streets team, shower power. What does shower power do? Really, in disguise for giving a shower, what we can do is to help bring a place of convergence of people and resources. Well, it's soap and it's towels and it's drinking water and it's some food, and maybe it's a haircut, it's a conversation, it's doing a survey so we can see people over time and create regularity. So now we're seeing progress. We could have CORE beside us. We could have healthcare for the homeless beside us. We could have lifelong medical care coming down. We could have stronger relationships with the business community so that we can provide those resources at this shower program, because everyone wants a shower. So all we do is provide the shower, and then folks come together. So let's try to create, in a sense, in this COVID sense, a mobile solution right there next to an encampment. And this one is right at Grip. There's encampments in all directions unless they get evicted. So we have folks in our neighborhood right there around that location. If you want to come see it, we're there Friday from 11 to 2, come see, come train to be a shower power volunteer. Next slide, please. So what's next? I just mentioned transitional villages, but it does not end. It only begins when we have that RV village that is either going to be up on Hilltop or down right there in front of City Hall. In front of City Hall. What a message we're going to be sending, we, the community, that we can do something right in our city's front yard. And so transitional villages, why are they so important? Because we don't have housing. We don't have much shelter. With Congress, I ran shelters all my life. I know how bad it is for COVID style to have folks in congregate environments. So we need to be providing it in a different way. And now the opportunity of COVID actually is that we are attending to issues that otherwise we haven't had the guts, or the attention to really do. Now we have to do it. We can provide temporary emergency housing with supportive services that bridges the gap between homelessness and permanent housing, because housing first is a beautiful idea. So we can offer the structure, safety, stability that it takes for folks to have that sense of purpose. Collectively, we can do stuff. The folks in that transitional village, they can be providing the security. They can be, if it's an RV community, could be doing their own mechanic work together, and not in the style of you're chopping stolen cars, but now you can use your skill to actually fix people's dwelling units, their homes back up. So we can provide these solutions, these many, many, many small interventions that we put together, and we call it a transitional village. Eventually, it should say, what's next? Permanent supportive housing in an eco-village style. But we're not there yet, so we're not going to talk about that yet. Transitional villages, that's what we need to talk about in most of our neighborhoods that are already impacted by homelessness, because we, again, reduce crime and we increase order. We have a sense of safety in our neighborhoods because of the presence of it's been proven around the country because of these transitional villages. That's basically my little, my presentation. If you want to have my basic information, it's right there. SOS Richmond, we're on Facebook group. If you haven't joined, you need to, please. And be part of the conversation and the ideas. What's amazing now is that collective we is driving this growth, this expansion of a model, the series of ideas that get implemented as a strategy that's focused on giving opportunity to folks who otherwise don't. So if we were talking about reimagining, just this last thought, let's reimagine how we do prevention in our encampments, so that it's not just about referral to, service way down at the other side of Alameda County, way down in San Leandro. Wow. What about what we can do by providing peer outreach and support? And we can create that Kahoot style model. We can, but without the dollars that they need, we can do it by empowering our leaders to become skillful enough that they can be crisis, counselors, that they can work alongside mental health and EMT to provide the basic services that folks need right there in the field. And it's about dealing with urgent crises right then and there. That's what I think we can do. If we want to reimagine, let's reimagine that. How we improve, how we empower folks to be supportive of each other. And we can do it. We are doing it now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Daniel. And I will remind everyone that all the presentations that are shown tonight will be on our website tomorrow. So it looks like we have a few questions, and Marcus, you're first.
Thanks for the presentation, Daniel. Appreciate it. I have a question for you. These transitional villages that you speak of, is this like a theory or like a dream, or is it like, is this actually something that's been implemented in other places and has implemented here?
Yeah, I could share with you a nice little PowerPoint that I did in September 2017. I wanted to show it at the Homeless Task Force as not just a concept, but as a reality that has been happening all over the country since the 90s in some places, especially up in the Northwest. But it's been happening in the Bay Area too, especially for folks living in vehicles and RVs and other, other dwelling units that are vehicles. So that's where the city is starting with, and it's going to hit the ground running, and Michelle can talk more about it when we give her time to speak, that here we are, the city of Richmond is with the county, is ponying up enough money to hopefully be able to provide the resources to as many people as possible who are living in RVs. And then can we create more of them, and can they be more self-managed? In other words, utilizing that empowerment model that I just spoke about? Absolutely. The more that it's like the institutional models, like what happens, no offense to Berkeley and Oakland and San Francisco, but you know what, those projects tend to be treated like projects, right? It's not folks' home. It doesn't feel like it. They didn't help create it. They didn't help manage it. And that's the difference that I would like to see, that I think folks would like to see, and that would welcome people into the door rather than being in a sense of crisis. They're finding refuge. They're finding their home in a place that they can call home, at least temporarily. I know transitional, the notion transitional has two aspects. One of it is a transitional placement in a neighborhood. It's not a permanent fixture, because we can't promise, because we can't expect neighborhoods to take that transitional village and hold on to it forever. It's something that happens in the short term to address a crisis, in this case for COVID, and for the explosion of homelessness that we have yet to see fully happen. And yet it's also transitional because it's interim sheltering. That interim sheltering is providing that bridge, as I said, from unsheltered to hopefully to permanent housing. And so yes, they are available.
Thank you. So when you refer to the transitional villages, you're just referring to like RV areas and car park programs, nature?
No, if you hear me talking about it, I think RVs are much more stable in and of themselves, need the villages much less than folks who are in tents right now, or without the tents, because they just got evicted, right? Because they are in the places that no one should be living in, and they're hidden. So the point is, bring more visibility and care for each other in an environment called the transitional village. And the state allows for us to create emergency sleeping cabins that conform to now new state emergency codes, building codes. So we can build them, and it's just half the size of half this room, that I would happily, well, I have kids, so that I could live in, that you and I could live in, and we would then have shared amenities that are hopefully in times of past COVID that we're able to do even more, like shared kitchen, shared bathroom, the showers that show up, and all the resources that are collectivized.
Okay, so Kristen, and then Randy, and then Tamisha. All together, we have about 5 or 6 minutes, like about 5 minutes, so that we can definitely give Michelle some time to give us some updates on what Richmond's doing.
All right. Wow, Daniel, thank you so much. I'm so thrilled you came, and this is really exciting and inspiring. I have a question about Caltrans. So a lot of our unhoused encampments are on Caltrans land. Does Caltrans notify the county or CORE, outreach people, or you, SOS, or like when they come sweeping through?
Well, that's a Michelle question. I'm going to leave for her, except to say that when I asked Michelle that question, they didn't communicate with the city. I'm sorry, they didn't. And so when I reach out directly and had an invitation to reach in, for them to reach into us as collaborators, we haven't been able to successfully make that link yet. There's an old model that Caltrans has that doesn't fit with this crisis of homelessness, and we could work on that. And that is something that we plan and trust and believe we will do. But the further away the source of the ownership of that authority, the further away, of course, the less accountable to that neighborhood. So how can we now change that dynamic? Absolutely we can, but it's not an easy road. It has to go through, in this case, it would go through Buffy Wicks. For UP, we'd be talking with Mark Desaulnier, and we will have some action at those levels when we collectively, it's not maybe Richmond just by itself. That's why we have to be cross-jurisdictional in our approach. And so I'm working with the cities outside of Richmond, trying to build this approach that works together, because our problem is not bounded by this city, of course.
Thank you. Randy?
Hey, Daniel, thank you for your presentation. I have a couple questions for you. One, how much is this costing per for you to do? I see that you got some funding from the county, but how much is this costing you to do? And how many people do you have in total?
Oh yeah, so great. Like I said, tiny. But we started with a little bit of money from ECIA, City Chevron money that they gave us because they pollute us. And then from that pilot, we were then able to get some money from the county through the city. And that was that $60,000 that we talked about that started last June. And here we are. We've stretched that puppy as long as we could, and now it's almost gone. And we matched that with more than that in community donations,
Okay. So to follow up, like, if you were to run this for a year, how much would this cost?
Oh, so I want to send you that little programs and budget kind of scenario. But if I remember correctly, the basic would be $250,000, I would say.
$250,000.
Well, and of course, everything's about scale. If you want to see this happen really well, it has to be more. But the basic for covering, for getting enough mileage to go to all parts of Greater Richmond, yes.
Okay. Do you have? I know the other presentation worked with having an account, but it was like one day. Do you have a number, or specifically how many, like, or a ballpark figure, how many people you serve since you started?
Well, so okay. So first of all, you asked how many people do we employ, and we've employed as many as 11 at one time. Now, and it's hard. I mean, we just had a death among our team.
Sorry for your loss.
Yes, it's a really challenging situation to try and hold on to, retain. So maybe an average right now at the level that we get funded, maybe 6 would be the number that we would be having as staff. Now, as we expand and do go from 3 shower locations to 12, and if we really are hitting and if we're doing the streets team, and what I didn't talk about was the encampment engagement. That's the serious business that really gets us toward, having those stable villages. Now we're talking about a whole lot more. So we just recently gave a city budget that was 150 for 2 locations, about 150,000 each. So
for the tiny videos, and then like I'm telling you where I'm going for the bath. Ask this last question. The last question is you brought up the transitional housing thing. You talk about let's make this a reality. Like, I see places in Oakland that have those tiny houses where they have those empty parking lots that are not being used, and they're doing tiny houses, for example. And I look at places, I see Hilltop, and I see pretty much an empty space, and I see the parking lot is being used for Amazon. Is there a way that working with the city to have tiny homes set up in that area with services as well, would you see that as a fit that can be possible? And I ask that question because I've seen 2 different presentations about this, and I've seen this is what the county is doing, but I don't hear enough of how the city is funding, and how the city has its own budget, and how the city has money earmarked for public safety. And I feel like homelessness falls under that public safety. And I'm trying to get numbers across to see, like, how much does this cost to get funding? Because I know homelessness costs the city a lot more with cleanup, with trying to do a lot of this stuff. And I'm hearing $250,000 that all the workers you're doing. And I don't think that's a lot of money to put into this program to make sure that this works and that we support these people, because you don't know what's happening by the end of this moratorium, how many people were struggling. So that's where I'm going with this.
Right. If we were to hire 100 people, which let's look at SOS a couple years down the line, it should have a staff of 100. We're talking then, more than 1 million. So it's all about scale. What is it that we truly want to accomplish? Do we want some folks getting support and others being still neglected? How do we ration ourselves? And to your question about, can we have tiny homes in people's in private locations? Absolutely, we've been looking at that from get-go. But it starts with us getting the city, county to be doing it, to show that it's successful in its sanctioned official version, and then we can get more independently created ones in partnership with city and county. when we have more creative folks coming to the table. Like, for example, we got money from HelloFresh. It's an amazingly generous donation that they gave, because their backyard, the parking lot next to their parking lot, is full of RVs, maybe 30, 40 of them. And it's an unsafe situation. They want to see change. So can we provide that change? So let's say we do. And 6 months from now, a year from now, we have a different situation there, because we still will have homelessness there. Then can we in that neighborhood say, well, that's that big old plot of land across the street, let's remediate it and let's provide that transitional village there. I think we can get businesses to say yes to that.
So I'm gonna cut you off, because I'm seeing in the chat that Michelle's like, there is a ordinance that was passed for tiny housing and looking at a program. And I feel like with you and having that imagination right there and having that setup, why can't that program be implemented through the city? And so my thing is that, like, working as trying to get suggestions to go to city council, I look at that as a starting point to where that program can be implemented, because they're already looking for it. You already have it built. You already have the imagination. You already have the footwork. And then there's examples. There's Oakland. There's Berkeley. There's other examples. So why can't we implement this now and go forward with this? Yeah, and so that's what I'm saying. And I want to see more of this. And this is something that I'm going to bring back to my subgroups to have as a suggestion as well, because I think that's important. And I think the money is there. I know the space is there, and the city is looking for it. I just think that's where it goes. So that's all I have.
Okay, thank you, you guys. Luis, is this something that we can possibly ask at the end of Michelle's presentation? Because there's tons of information coming through on the chat, and it's hard to capture that, and we want to make sure we give Michelle enough time. Is it okay, Luis, or do you?
No, yeah, it's all good. It's all good.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Yeah.
Okay, so Michelle, can you go ahead? We have about 12 to 13 minutes for your presentation and questions and answers.
Wow. Okay. Thank you. I'll try to be as brief as I can. You guys have a PowerPoint for me, right? And I'm not going to go through all the PowerPoint, because as my pastor always says, when other people go before you, you can say yes and amen. So my name is Michelle Milam. I'm a crime prevention manager for the city of Richmond. I'm also staff to the city of Richmond's homeless task force. And a lot of the different programs that we're talking about came through the homeless task force, which was established in 2017 by a community member requesting it, in addition to support from council member or then Mayor McLaughlin. Next slide. So I want to talk about some of the current issues, and I'm not going to revisit things that we've already talked about, but we have a lot of issues going on in homelessness in Richmond that we're all dealing with. And it's not just Richmond, it's regional. One is the shelter crisis pandemic. People don't have enough places to go. Hotels, the hotel project Room Key, which is so great that Daniel talked about with Randy, still is 98% full, which means that when CORE goes out to try to place people into housing, they're having trouble because we have a shelter crisis. We also want to avoid criminalization of people. Homelessness is not a crime, and it shouldn't be a crime. Crime should be a crime, but homelessness should not be a crime. So how do you balance that so you can give people services and also kind of deal with the whole issue of safety issues? We have encampment fires. We also have things that go on encampments. People in encampments need, basic quality of life and quality of living services. We also talk about the high cost of rent, equity. I do want to say that when you look at the HMIS data, especially the data that we collected from CORE, which is different from Point in Time, that actually shows some of the racial demographics, we're looking at primarily Black men who are impacted by this. And there is a definite equity issue to address. Also, ability issue. We have a lot of folks who are disabled. Over 50% of the people who are in encampments who said their last place of shelter was a place not meant for habitation, where people had some kind of a disability. We also heard that the delays of funding. Funding is a huge issue. A lot of times the county gets money through the state. So when you see Gavin Newsom talk about orders, they come down through the county. Richmond does not get its own pot like Oakland and these other cities. We have to actually work with the county, as you saw Jamie's presentation, to try to get some of that money and then direct it to the things that we think the community wants to see. And then we also see first-time homelessness. You guys talked about homelessness prevention. We have, even with the current state moratorium, you have to pay back 25% of your back owed rent. What's going to happen to all these folks who don't have that 25%? Well, what we're seeing happening is they're going into first-time homelessness into a system that already is not able to receive them. And then we have NIMBYism, because when we finally get the money and the resources and the partnerships together, like Daniel said, we have to do work with the community because people don't want things like this in their backyard, in part, not because they're not sympathetic, but they're concerned about the crime. So what do we do? Next slide. So there's a couple of things that the city has done. You guys have heard about the homeless task force. It is a community-based task force that includes city and county staff. We don't actually run specific like this task force. We actually really work in more working group fashion. Jamie's a member of that. So is Daniel. So are members of CORE. So are community members. And we work together to provide policy directives to city council, and anyone's welcome to join. So one of the things we said we want to focus on was mobile services like CORE and SOS, getting them more funding. I mean, when I saw that the HEAP dollars needed to be allocated or reallocated, one of the first things I said is we need to allocate some funding to help support encampments. So programs like SOS, working with the county to try to get portable toilets, even though we only got maybe 5 of them, choose some of those places so people can have some of those services. We focus on expanding shelter capacity and our safe parking program, looking at how we can work with the county to improve emergency sheltering, because we do need emergency sheltering. And then also looking for longer term options for very low income housing, like tiny homes. You guys might have heard about the Hacienda project and Terrace. When the city builds these kinds of programs, our recommendation from the task force has been, let's set aside some funding and some vouchers for people who are transitioning from homeless. So those projects we're already building are going to benefit those people who have historically been disadvantaged. Next slide. Jamie showed this chart, so I'm not going to go over it, but you can see that Richmond has a high number of people who are unsheltered. It's even higher than that. If you look at the HMIS data from 3/1/2020 to 1/31/2021, CORE actually made contact with unduplicated 428 contacts. That's just for the Richmond San Pablo team. It doesn't include the West County team. So we know that the numbers are much higher than what point in time says. Next slide. Funding. So a lot of you asked about funding. So initially when CORE kind of got started and the homeless task force made a recommendation that we need more mobile services like the ONS model, the services don't need to be in random places where people who are unhoused and may have access to transportation issues have to go. They should come to the people. At that time, Richmond PD actually had a small contract set up with a group that was doing some of this kind of work pre-CORE. And then the county picked up the CORE program. And so we actually started to contribute $100,000 a year. The only year that wasn't impacted was this coming year, because HEAP actually took care of it for both Richmond and San Pablo with a reallocation of HEAP dollars. But those dollars actually come from the department budget. The city also made a decision to set aside $300,000 in developer in lieu fees. So those are fees that developers pay in lieu of housing, developing housing for folks who are very low income for a transitional service model. This is helping to go towards the funding of the Safe Park program. And the council set this aside. It was a recommendation that came from the homeless task force. The city also leverages some of those resources like HEAP that Jamie talked about. So the county is actually contributing to the Safe Park program. They've contributed to HEAP funds through the requests that we made for SOS. Next slide. I'm not going to go over point in time data, but just so you can kind of see where some of the need is. The Safe Park, our car and RV, we have a list of 2020 point in time count where people were sleeping by setting. And you can see that 15% of the folks who were in the point in time were sleeping in a car, 5% were in a van, 17% were in an RV. And then you see that there's still a large portion that Daniel talked about, people who are sleeping on the streets and the sidewalks, who need immediate shelter services or need some kind of an interim sheltering service where they are to be able to get into shelter. And so at that time, one of the things that we made a recommendation from, there was a community meeting and people really wanted to see this idea of some kind of a transitional program for safe parking. Next slide. And actually, I'm sorry, this slide was out of order in terms of equity, but I will talk about this briefly because I think the next slide is going to the survey. So access to mental health services and AOD are really difficult for folks, especially folks that are sleeping out on the streets, as you heard from the last mental health slide. And it's really important that we connect to that, because mental health housing, as Jamie said, is very difficult to attain and come by, so that people have a place where they can get stabilized. Next slide. So I wanted to talk about the RV breakdown. We did do a survey, and we were able to identify that there were a significant portion of vehicles, at least 84, that were on Richmond public streets at any given time, where people needed a place or a safe place to park. Next slide. So a little bit about Safe Parking Program. Safe Parking Program is basically what it sounds like. It's a place where people can, in safety, have a place to park, get resources, go to have basic things like being able to go to the bathroom, being able to get meal services, being able to connect with showers, getting a case management plan so that they can move to the next step. It has security, it has lighting, it has power. It has all the things that people need to be able to be sheltered in their vehicle, until we're able to get to this point where we have more of that permanent supportive housing. It's not an either or to me. I think that that's a disservice. We need to do all these things. We need to have interim sheltering opportunities. We need to have outreach, and we need to move towards, permanent supportive housing. So those are the kinds of programs that we have been focused on. The city looked at over 35 sites. We did a research project with the planning committee and also with the homeless task force, and looked at it over 18-month period. Everywhere we went where we wanted to look at even kind of asking neighbors if they were interested in the site, we were met with a lot of opposition. Fortunately, this past, the Tuesday before last, the council decided to make a final decision on the safe parking program, and we'll be able to accommodate between 20 and potentially 40 vehicles, depending on where the site ends up ultimately landing. But it will be able to provide people with a safe place to be able to park. Next slide. I'm not going to go over all of CORE and SOS because they have already talked about that adequately. So, but the city has tried to support those with either city dollars or being able to utilize those county pass-through dollars to help support some of those things. But there's still a lot more we could do, like Randy talked about. We could definitely fund more of these programs at capacity. Next slide. Emergency sheltering. I don't think I have to say it again, but we are in a crisis. I think I've been saying this for over a year, and excuse me if I get a little emotional about it. There are no beds for people. I had to talk to a woman who was sleeping under a church and asked me, is it safe for me to sleep in a park? Now, I'm a city employee, but I grew up in the city of Richmond, and this woman reminded me of my grandmother. And the only thing that I could think to say to her at the time is, if it gets bad enough, because I know there's no beds for you, call an ambulance. But wait, the emergency rooms are full because of COVID. This is this kind of crisis that people are facing all the time. And there are really great people on this call that presented to you tonight that are doing great work, but they need continued support. So this is where we need to really kind of look at how we can leverage our services to service people who need it, who are our human beings. They're our neighbors, they're our friends, they're someone's grandmother, they're someone's son, and being able to make those kinds of connections. So, we really need to address the emergency sheltering crisis as a city and as a region. And that's something that the city is looking at. There was a meeting today to follow up on, you guys talked about transitional villages. There is a transitional village, excuse me, I'm not transitional village, I'm sorry. There is a tiny house ordinance that is on the books for the city of Richmond that expires in July. We want to extend that ordinance. It actually was set up for a pilot project. But if the pilot project is successful, or maybe we need to expand it, we want to be able to do more of these. There is a group from UC Berkeley called THIMBY, and they actually have costed out what it would cost to be able to build one of these tiny homes on wheels. And it costs about $25,000, which, if that was it was kind of similar to, obviously a backyard ADU program. If we had people who were willing to put a tiny home on wheels in their backyard and be able to house someone who is unsheltered, it would make a big difference. Or we may be able to put it in another area where we can actually allot more space. So these are all things that actually are going forward, and we really do attribute a lot of these successes and a lot of these movements and policy to recommendations from the community. Actually, the Employment and Training Division has a grant to be able to provide labor. So we're kind of restricted by COVID, but they could actually provide a lot of the labor in building some of these tiny homes on wheels. And then you can move them if you need to. That's the nice thing about the tiny homes on wheels model. So if you guys want more information about that, I can present to you later on. And then final slide, I just want to talk about some of the task force goals very quickly. You know, one of the recent recommendations we made is we know that even with the safe parking program, even if we're able to expand some of the hotel capacity, even, you know, with GRIP being open for their family shelter and they're even being impacted with that because there's a lot of families going to homelessness, there's still going to be people sleeping on the street and there's going to still be people who are sleeping in their vehicles. So one of the things that the task force recently recommended to our city council liaison, Councilmember Willis, is that the city consider putting forward some legislation that allows churches or private properties allow 1 or 2 vehicles for short-term basis to be able to stay overnight on someone's property without having to worry that a call is going to come in from a resident saying you have to move. Because I like to end this by saying is that, you know, when we talk about when the police come in, most of the officers I work with really appreciate all these kinds of services because this is not their expertise. This is not their job. This is not why they are coming in to do what they do. I started getting into this work as a department staff member because officers would come to me and say, I have this family and there's 3 kids and I don't want to cite them. What do I do, Michelle? And, you know, trying to figure out some solutions and working with some of our service providing agencies in the community to work on those kinds of things. So that was one of the recommendations that we made that we could do that are enabling, and that doesn't cost any money. That could be done right now with some staff analysis. And adding additional resources obviously could help. We're going to continue to try to address some of the stuff around the pandemic. We're going to continue to try to support programs like safe parking and such as SOS and the hotel and housing program. And I think we need to talk about prevention, as Jamie said, and as Daniel said, what do we do when the rent becomes due? And we have people who can't afford to pay it that are going into a system that's in crisis. That's a discussion that's not only just a city discussion that you all have to consider as task force members, that's a discussion we have to have as a city and as a region. Because it's going to impact all of us. And so I'll end at this point in time. And if you all have other questions for me, I'm sorry this was a little bit rushed. You can feel free to ask them.
I am going to ask if anyone wants to make a motion to extend the meeting. It's 7:20 right now. And I have a feeling that the discussion is going to be a little bit over 10 minutes and we would still need to open this floor up for public comment. And I believe that some attendees do want to speak as well as any final member comments. We're going to try the poll. So bear with us with this technological advancement. Okay, Randy, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to extend the meeting 30 minutes past 7:30.
Is there a second? I don't hear a second. So
I'll second. It's Kristen.
Okay. So we're going to use the poll and Stephanie is going to bring up the poll. So if everyone can vote on the motion, and then please, attendees, please do not respond to the poll. Okay, it looks like we had more than a quorum vote in the poll, And it looks like the ayes have it. So we will be adjourning at 8 p.m. Okay, Don.
Thanks for this presentation, Michelle. And I'm speaking from ignorance here, so please help me out on this. But on these RV encampments, can you elaborate on the safety issues, what kind of safety issues we're talking about, and then tell us how these the safe parking projects will address those issues?
Yes. So, at the RV encampments that kind of exist, there has been a lot of work, great work done by SOS and others to try to help improve safety along with PD and CORE. But, certain things like, there are people with children who are living in cars right now in places like Ryden Road and, may not let their children out because they're afraid to do that. They might be afraid of their documentation status. Sometimes there's conflict between members. Sometimes it's just a matter of being out, sometimes in the elements and people get concerned about them. A lot of times it's neighbors who are concerned because the neighbors say, well, we don't feel safe with this car parked here because we don't know who it is, or there's trash, there's debris, there's blight and quality of life issues. So a safe parking program really provides, first of all, those who participate in it with more of a sense of safety because it's city sanctioned. It's a place where people can go. They're going to be able to stay there for up to 6 months. They can come up with some kind of a plan to be able to figure out what next steps are. There's power, there's lighting, there's food, there's electricity. So a lot of the amenities that they may not have or they may have to find in other ways at some of the other places that they may be parking or finding some shelter, some space. That doesn't deal with the people who are in the encampments and who are in tents. The people in tents are really vulnerable because they're out there exposed to the elements. And I know of at least several, folks who are unsheltered and housed, including women who were murdered because they're sleeping outside in their tent and they don't have a safe space to be. So the safety value is for those who need that safety, who are in that area and who are unsheltered, and also being able to create a sense of community safety. So if something comes into a neighborhood, people understand that we're going to have security, we're going to have lighting, that this is not going to be kind of just something that is not organized.
That's all you had, Don?
Well, I'm not quite sure that I understood how the safe parking sites will be addressing the actual safety issues. I mean, a lot of the things you mentioned in the about the existing is, I didn't see quite as safety. I mean, being afraid of immigration status. I mean, that kind of stays one way or the other. And being around other in neighborhoods, but I'm just not quite sure how things are going to be safer at these sites, just because you've got lighting and you've got so-called security.
Yeah, I think that, in terms of the safety in the police world and in like safety world, we use something called CPTED, which is crime prevention through environmental design, which basically says if the built environment actually has safe features, things can be more, you can actually improve safety on site. So most of the places that have done this, whether it's San Leandro, whether it's Walnut Creek, whether it's Oakland, they have fencing, they have lighting, they have people who are there to kind of control the access and the flow of who comes into some of the safe parking communities. So it can't just be some random person that kind of comes in. For example, in one of our parking communities that is not, actually the city sanctioned safe park, we've had folks who have been victimized. They've had their trailers broken into. They've been the victim of robbery, of crime, of theft, of people, actually committing assaults against them. And they don't have a safe space to be because they're kind of out there in the open. So when a safe parking community, it provides the participants with some level of safety. Now, if you're talking about the neighborhood, part of what we try to do is, okay, you're just talking about the participants, then the participants are provided with a greater level of safety because it's really set up and designated to help protect and promote their safety.
Okay, Randy.
Thank you for your presentation. I wanted to follow up about the budget thing. And maybe this is ignorance or wanting to know more, maybe getting that budget presentation somehow. Isn't there money set aside for public safety in general in the city budget? And does that also come from the county, or is that money that the city generates?
So I think that if you're not talking about just for homeless services, you're talking about for public safety in general. So yeah, the majority of funding for public safety comes from the public agency that, that provides the safety to the, the folks. It's taxpayer dollars. It's no different than, Public Works or any other city dollars that comes from there. We do get sometimes some funding that comes in from, grants. So it could be federal grants, it could be other assistance programs, but the primary funding for public safety, comes from the city general fund and how, how those budgetary priorities are spent. And it just depends on, what those things are budgeted for. Specifically for the core homeless outreach, for example, that funding actually was set aside out of the police department budget. It was a set aside. And, if I know we have limited time, but it was a set aside specifically for that. San Pablo actually agreed to partner with us so we could have a full team. And so that's how we're able to pay for that service.
So my question is, instead of it coming from a set aside direct from the police department budget, why isn't it coming from a set aside from the public safety budget in general?
Well, I think if you're meaning public safety budget, so public safety would include police and fire. Is that what you are referring to? Because those are the two public safety entities.
It comes from for whatever budget's paying ONS, police and fire. There's a big pot of money that all comes from. There's a earmark for public safety, and then that gets divvied up to the different places. My question is, from that public safety money, that pot's right there, how come the money for programs like these won't come directly from this and not from a subset from the police budget? Because I hear it's coming from a section of something else, but why isn't it coming from the whole at the top? It's not more like trickle down and not so much from the source.
Well, I think initially it's because, when you guys have a conversation about budget, I think that they'll be able to explain structurally how it functions. But police and fire each have their own budget. ONS has its own budget. So it's not one uniform budget that's just set aside for public safety. That's just not how the budgetary process is done in terms of the line items. But the reason that this set aside came from the police department initially was because there was a small pilot project that was started to try to provide the services, and the homeless task force complained because it was taken away. It was only $20,000 and it was taken away. So the city council voted to restore it. And actually the city manager identified the funds before the city council voted to restore it. And so that's how that came to be. But I think maybe those questions would be something that could be answered in the budgetary presentation. And that would be a question that you all can pose, as task force members about how you want that divvied up. I'm pretty sure ONS is pretty strapped, so they probably don't want a reduction to be able to do this, but it could be transferred there.
Okay, so I put that on to the city, and maybe that's a question that when that budget presentation comes, that I would like an answer to, because that's not being clear for me, and I want to make that clear. The second question I have is that I hear you, Michelle. I come from a place where I know when I was in high school living in Richmond, I had to sleep in a car with my mom because we were homeless for about 6-7 months. So I understand the struggle. My not understanding is, why is it illegal to sleep in your car in the first place? That to me is to me, that goes to the heart of criminalizing homelessness. It's like, you don't have a place to go, but you can't sleep in your car. What, you want me to sleep on the ground? You want me to, where do you want me to go? So my question is, why isn't there a fight to change that law? I feel like it's stupid, for lack of a better word, because the police are not citing people, they're trying to get them help. So they shouldn't be having to do that in the first place. Why is that illegal?
I think that that's a good question. And I think with a city of 100,000 people, there's a lot of people who would share that opinion with you. And then there's a lot of people who don't, because remember, we get calls for service from people who call to complain about that. And there's other people who don't want that. Yeah, to be honest and fair, it's everyone, because I'm crime prevention manager. So I do hear it from every sector of the community. Unfortunately, they don't want the car parked on their block. They don't want the bus parked there. They don't want the RV parked there. So I think that's a conversation that policymakers and communities need to have. But from our standpoint, what we could do is we have churches and we have other groups that are willing to take people in, because sometimes people don't feel comfortable also sleeping on the street, and they want some place that's a little bit more enclosed and some place that's near people and other services. They don't want to be isolated. So I think those are important conversations to have.
Okay. Thank you. That's what I have.
And I think it was Louise. Did you still have a comment or a question, or?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Does anyone else have anything else they want to ask or add or have a comment about? Okay, well, I'm going to say thank you again to all of our presenters, and we really appreciate you taking your time to spend your evening with us. All of this information has been extremely enlightening and super important and extremely important, informative to me. I did not know a lot of what you all talked about tonight, and I really appreciate the information. So right now we're going to open up our presentation to the public for public comment, and we will allow for 2 minutes for the public to raise their hand. And it looks like we already have one speaker that has raised their hand, and we will allow them 1 minute. Or Deborah, do you want to go first before we open it up?
No, I can wait.
Okay. Because we do have a member comment section after this.
Oh, I can wait for that too.
Okay.
Okay, so our first speaker will be Carol U. Johnson. Carol, you can speak and you have 1 minute.
So can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to say all the presentations were great and the questions and comments, but I'm just concerned if there's an eviction moratorium, and it's not just about the landlords evicting people, that the courts get involved and the sheriffs, they're the ones evicting people. So why are they even cooperating if there's a moratorium? I don't know if anybody can answer that question.
Well, if you'd like, what we're going to do is we're going to take your question and put it into our tracking document, and we will, you can have, once we get the answer, then you can look at it on the website. Just keep checking the website for your tracking.
Can I
So just to clarify, I'm just wondering why the sheriffs and the courts are cooperating with if there's an eviction moratorium.
Can I speak to that?
Really quickly.
Yeah, so Carol, a lot of it, people are being evicted, and sometimes the sheriffs are not coming. They get scared because they don't know their rights and they don't want to get the sheriffs involved, and they leave on their own reconnaissance because they don't know their rights. And that's a big problem. And that's where the lack of education or not being able to tell people what the moratorium is and how it protects you, and them not understanding what they have, and they get, so sheriffs usually not getting involved, is that they're leaving on their own reconnaissance because they're worried and they're scared because they don't know their rights. And that's a big problem that needs to be addressed.
Okay, we need to go to our next speaker. And the 2 minutes time allotment for people to raise their hand is complete. So we have, after Carol, there was Jan, Marco, and then Miss Dandy.
Okay, Jan, you can speak now. You have 1 minute.
Thank you. I want to thank everybody for their presentations. I thought it was great. I learned more information on a lot of this than I had before. And I've heard a lot of the homelessness information before. One of the things I think would be very important for us as a city, because I keep hearing other neighborhoods saying, oh no, they can't park in my neighborhood. No, they can't park in my neighborhood. I am more than willing to have them park by the city hall in the parking lot there. Let's have them in the middle of downtown, middle of Richmond, and let's show that we have respect for people and do things that are respectful. They have to realize other people need to realize, there but the grace of God goes me. This could be happening to anybody, unless you're lucky enough to have a job or to have money or to have something. So I would love to see people be there on Barrett Avenue.
Thank you, Jan. Okay, the next speaker is Marco.
Okay, Marco, you can speak now and you have 1 minute.
All right. I have a question for Daniel. I just wanted to know how you guys at SOS deal with donations. I don't know if you spoke about it in your presentation, but if you can just go into depth real quick about how you guys handle that and what's your system for it, that'd be great.
That's great. That's of course I want to know. I want to be able to answer that question because that's how we're subsisting.
Dan, is it okay? Can I ask you to do that at the end so that I can
Sure.
get the other speakers done, and then we'll end that, and then we'll have you answer that because I'm sure everyone wants to know how we can help and assist and donate.
Thank you.
Okay.
Well, actually, more specifically, food donations. If you can go into that in depth with that, yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then Ms. Danby, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I just wanted to lead off where Jan started, what I was going to say. The problem with the homelessness in Richmond, mostly everywhere, is the fact that everyone wants someone to help all the homelessness. They want the city and all the programs to take care of the homelessness that's going on. But as soon as places are put out there for the homeless to go to, everyone raises their hand, I don't want them there. So we're having a miscommunication of, do we want to help the homeless or do we not? Because we have places for them to go, and as soon as it goes there, someone wants to say no. So we have to figure out and come to a consensus, and like Ms. Jan said, to put them in the middle of Barrett and say, here, this is what all we have now. So how do we work with the entire city to get everyone to understand that regardless to if you want to help them or not, it is still going to be there. And we need to make sure that everyone understands it's the city's issue and the county's issue and everyone else and everyone's issue. So we need to do something.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Dandy. That concludes our public comment section of this presentation. So please, Daniel, if you can provide that information to the entire group, that'd be helpful.
Well, so the first and most important is having the flexibility to receive funding, money, financial donations, and that's easy through Venmo. I know we want to talk about the food, but just running through the range. And so there's a Venmo account that is SOS capitals _ capital Richmond, SOS _ Richmond. And that's where we've gotten about more than half of our funding is by simple financial donations. We started a winter campaign, and with the goal of providing tents and tarps and sleeping bags and other survival gear. And so we have various means that we're doing that, schools and churches, and the Richmond Rotary has a registry where they can pick items and it gets delivered to my door, and then I'm passing it out next day as we're going about and someone needs a tent and so forth. So and then of course we need donations always of socks and underwear, because we want to give everyone socks and underwear when they take a shower. And then for food is challenging in the sense that there's having to be the scale to be able to distribute food is something that what we've done is we've collected food from USD and from some organizations like Free Meals on Wheels, and our pal had the World Kitchen. I forget what it was called. And so we had a lot of meals coming in that we would then distribute as we were doing our outreach. So if there was a resource that you were suggesting, what I think the best way to do it would be whatever day of the week that could happen, we would then bring it to our mobile shower program at that location. And that would be something that we provide when folks converge to get the showers.
And I'm sure more information, they can email you or give you a call and you can help explain that a little more.
That's right. I'll put my information back into the chat.
Thank you so much. Okay, so right now we will be concluding our presentation and concluding the public comment section. And thank you again to all of our guests this evening. We really appreciate it. So we will have about 5 minutes for member comments. If anyone wants to speak, I know Deborah, you had your hand raised before.
Yeah, and mine was actually more of a question. I was just curious whether or not there was any attempt by homeless services to work with the school district to identify homeless families or children that were homeless, currently homeless, that might not show up on the city's radar otherwise.
Yes, so we have a council on homelessness that has 19 appointed seats, and one of those seats is an educational seat that's held by somebody from the Contra Costa Office of Education. And her role is really to have every school district in Contra Costa has a homeless, sometimes a homeless and a foster youth liaison, or sometimes it's the same person. So each district has a person who's just basically responsible for thinking about and supporting families and children experiencing homelessness in their district. So we definitely, there are resources within the district, and then they're also connecting in with the sort of bigger decision-making process.
And how is that working now during COVID when they're not really seeing the children or families directly?
That's such an excellent question, and I actually don't know, and that's something I can ask. Alejandra Chamberlain is our contact. It's a really good question. So I don't know the answer. I think for a lot of those liaisons, they have some families that have already been on their radar that they're working with, but for new families, I don't know how they're getting the word out. So that's actually a great question that I can ask Alejandra.
Thank you very much.
Are there any more general member comments or any other final comments? Okay, it doesn't look like there is. And at this point,
I did.
I'm sorry, Randy.
My hand. That's okay.
I'm trying to go between screens.
That's okay. That's okay. That's fine. My feelings aren't hurt. My thing is, I do want to highlight. I think we touched on it. We talked about youth homelessness, and I want to get more in depth about that. More about why youth homelessness, why they become homeless. These are questions that I have. Is there a way they can get funding through the foster care system? That's another question. I don't know how that works. This is something that I'm new to. Is there a fast track for them to get funding and maybe temporary permanent housing? That's particularly bothersome. I also particularly bothersome that a lot of I see in Richmond, a lot of Black males are homeless, and see what the issues going on there. And I think that there's a lot of economics plays in that as well. I think that's just bigger than homelessness services. Is also like dealing with like jobs and stuff like that. Also looking into talking about I'm really interested in this tiny homes idea and seeing how they build out, especially hearing that the city does have an ordinance. And then how about getting funding? Because we do have Richmond Build, that's a local program that I can see supporting, helping build stuff to make things cost effective, and finding just areas to split things up. I'm really interested in that and seeing if that can be a suggestion that we could push forward to the city council. Those are things that I'm really interested in learning more about the budget and understanding this public safety money in this pool, because obviously I have no clue what the hell I'm talking about, and I may be misspeaking, but I want to learn about it and know information so to understand. I'm not saying like this is not me saying, oh, just take the money from here, but I want to learn more about it to know where that money comes from and how the city is spending money and how come we can set more money aside instead of taking it from a program's budget, but taking it directly from the city. Because I feel like as a city, as a community, we need to help each other. Because I think a lot of people forget that if you're homeless, you still live in Richmond. Like you're Richmond, right? You're part of this community as well. And we need to support everybody because long term, and we can be the next person on that list. I know I'm one lost job away from struggling. So I want to make sure that people have that support and those needs. So those are my comments for now. And I'm going to do some work and get some research. I hope we get those questions answered.
Okay, thank you. Michelle, and then, oh, that's Tanya. You have an A, but Michelle, then Tanya.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I also, for Tanya, I sent some of the statistics that we pull from HMIS, which is the county's system the Core is in, to enter some of this data. But, you know, we can work with you guys to try to pull like whatever information you want about transitional age youth. And Jamie and I work together to try to do that and try to get that information together. And I'm sorry for the acronym. It's the Homeless Management Information System. So it's kind of like the database where they collect a lot of the information. So I'd be happy to share that information. I shared some of it with the homeless subgroup, but I'd be happy to share that with you guys.
Okay, great. Tanya?
Yeah, I just wanted to uplift the conversation around like city funding for like initiatives like tiny homes and like transitional housing, because that's a field that like I'm working in now, is affordable housing, because I went from being like services and being on the street, you know, addressing some of the issues mentioned, to like wanting to go more in the community development side. And through that, I've learned about funding and just basically it's as frustrating as it sounds. You know, the city of Richmond receives its funds for affordable housing through the county. And so basically it's like this trickle down effect, you know, where the county distributes funds for affordable housing. And as of now, most of the funds that they are releasing, like RFPs and RFQs for, is basically for like gap funding. And so it's not even meant to like fund a whole project, but it's like meant to fill the small gap that you have in your budget to like make the project pencil. So just like highlighting the issues, you know, at the very top level around like funding for affordable housing is something that is at the state level, it's at the federal level. I do think that it's like a piece missing in the conversation, and I don't know if there's a coalition that kind of brings developers and people working on the ground and people working on policy together, because I do think that it's just one of those issues that is all the way to the top from HUD, you know, and it trickles all the way down to the city. And then also just wanted to highlight that there are 3 seats open, or there will be 3 seats open soon for the rent board, and there's no renters on the rent board. So I think it's a perfect time to really advocate and like do some outreach, you know, around that, especially because ACE is going to have an item on Tuesday around what everyone has kind of mentioned about if we don't address the rent relief that needs to happen now, so that we reduce the wave of homelessness coming in the near future due to COVID-19. I think it's really going to have a big impact. So just as a FYI, this Tuesday, City Council, there's going to be an item on that. And yeah, that's what I want to share.
Thank you so much, Tanya. And then our final comment from our membership is Kristen.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I wanted to point out that I watched the city council meeting when the 3 locations were presented for the safe parking program. And for those folks that have been talking about having it at Civic Center, and that would be the best location in your view, I just wanted to point out that the librarians called in to comment that they were against that idea. And I think it would be wise for folks on the homeless task force or some of us to reach out to them and have a conversation and see how we could support them, and listen to what they're dealing with, because apparently they're, you know, struggling right now with people that are living around the library, and just reach out to them because they were really opposed to it. And I just think it's important to reach out to them, whether it's in that location or not, because they seem to be struggling and trying to understand the issue in a deeper level. So that was my comment.
Thank you, Kristen. So at this point, we're going to just recap a few things. I know that staff, meaning me, Lupe, and Stephanie, really try our best to respond to as many questions, requests, concerns from not only the group, from the public, We try our best to get back information to you guys in a timely manner. We do try to, or we're attempting to do it in the most efficient way as possible so that as many people get the information as possible at the same time, so that we're not resending a lot of information, re-answering questions, and really encouraging you guys to get things rolling around really starting to synthesize some information and put together some things. So again, so our action item recap is to, again, continue to get as many answers as we can to you all as quickly as possible. And with that, I'm going to adjourn this meeting. And I just want to say thank you again and good night to everyone, and have a wonderful rest of your evening.
Thank you for this meeting.
Thank you. Thank you,
I
Joanne.
love you all.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks to presenters.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joanne.